a number of ships either headed to or potentially slated to go to the Eastern Mediterranean. Publication Stars and Stripes today, headline, U.S. considers moving second aircraft carrier into Eastern Mediterranean. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower could soon be deployed to the Eastern Mediterranean, a defense official saying Tuesday. It's a move that would position a second U.S. aircraft carrier in the region as fighting rages between Israeli forces and Hamas terrorists. The Eisenhower, along with other ships and aircraft that make up its strike group, is scheduled to depart Norfolk, Virginia this week. The aircraft carrier has long been scheduled to deploy and operate near Europe, according to Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Brian McGarry, the Defense Department spokesman. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin Sunday ordered the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike group to the region as a part of the U.S. response to the Hamas attack. The Ford, also based in Norfolk, was already operating in the Mediterranean. That carrier strike group had been conducting naval exercises just last week with Italy. For more on this, I want to bring in Lt Col Tony Shaffer now. He's the president of the London Center for Policy Research, a CIA-trained former senior intelligence officer, and on the phone with us now. Tony, good to have you with us, sir.
Vince, I always enjoy our conversations. Thanks for having me.
We've got what is a very obviously hot war now between Israel and Hamas, and U.S. warships headed in that direction. What do you make of the scene right now?
So I think they're going to deploy the Eisenhower actually to the Red Sea. I'm not sure of having two of them in the Mediterranean would be the best bet, since there's going to be other things you have to do with those things. And I think the primary reason they put the Gerald Ford there is to deter Hezbollah and the Iranians from any additional antics. And again, I'm speaking from experience, not any direct knowledge. We've probably moved special operations forces that we maintain in the region in Egypt and in Jordan closer to the scene of the crime, if you will, the Hamas attacks, because we've got U.S. hostages. I still think they're underplaying it. They just announced 22 murdered. I said that they were undercounting it by half that a few days ago, and sure enough, they did. I think the number of hostages, the U.S. hostages, are probably closer between 30 to 40. So I think there's a number of conversations going on right now between the Israelis and U.S. Special Forces about what can be done rapidly to get in there and get those folks out. So it's quite the tenuous situation. Still rockets flying out of the Gaza Strip.
Yep.
I talked to Ambassador Hararoni, one of my colleagues, and he said that he's very close to the action. A lot of tension still going on, and indeed, one of the choices they're doing right now is they're doing the siege. They cut off all the food, water, supplies. But believe it or not, they're actually considering negotiating to get some of the hostages back. It came as a shock to me.
Right. The Biden administration indicated today, John Kirby said that they have been negotiating with Hamas by way of the usual channels. That's through Qatar, because they're connected to Hamas. They have relationships with them. And also asked today whether or not the Biden administration is negotiating directly with Hamas. Kirby declined to answer the question. Didn't give a yes, didn't give a no. But clearly there is negotiating going on in a bunch of different directions to get Americans free. But the Biden administration today indicated, again, John Kirby, they don't actually know the number of American hostages. They don't know their condition. They don't even know if they're grouped together. There are a tremendous number of mysteries going on here.
Right. So, again, not direct knowledge theory based on what we study. I think they've got the hostages grouped into about 12 different groups dispersed through the area. For the audience to remember, the area that they're operating in, the Gaza Strip, is about the size of Manhattan plus the Bronx. Very densely populated, too many people. A lot of places to hide people, but I don't think they've dispersed them beyond clusters of about 12 groups. And to that point, I think they've kept probably nationalities together. We're not the only ones. The Italians have folks captured, a couple of the nationalities. So I think they're probably keeping them together for purposes of negotiation. But to your point, yeah, John Kirby's denial is a confirmation. Of course, they're negotiating directly with Hamas. I would argue, Vince, that the Biden administration is largely responsible for providing the conditions of the attack by encouraging Iran to become more violent, more aggressive. And while everybody, I think, recognizes the $6 billion that was going to Iran didn't get there, the simple fact that they caved and gave him that was the the basic conditions that encouraged, I think, Iran to support this attack by Hamas.
Not to mention the rampant amounts of kind of wink and a nod sanctions relief the Biden administration has given to Iran on oil.
Right.
Iran has made a tremendous amount of money from the Biden administration's decision to restrict the international oil market, to restrict the output of American oil. And that has enabled Iran and Russia, of course, to finance their military operations against both now Israel and Ukraine, respectively.
Of course. Think about this, Vince. I mean, if Biden wanted to defund Iran and defund Putin's war, you open our spigots. You drop the price of oil to $1.50 a gallon. You create such positive conditions for American industry to grow, for American to prosper, and to fund the very adversaries we say we're against. But of course, they won't do it.
So what did you make of the fact that in Biden's 10-minute teleprompter remarks yesterday that he never once mentioned Iran? What did you make of that?
It's like trying to talk about, the moon without mentioning anything regarding the Earth. The Earth and the moon are related. Well, Iran and terror is related, and he didn't mention it. And I think it's because of the very things you and I are speaking about, Vince. Any conversation about what the administration has done to benefit Iran would obviously look bad regarding the fact that they probably enabled Hamas. And I'm going to go on the record here and say this. I think there's ample opportunity for Iran to have actually coached and assisted Hamas to overcome and avoid detection by the Israeli intelligence system. There was a very sophisticated intelligence effort to counter the intelligence of the Israelis. So I think Iran was part of that. So again, you don't want to mention the guy who actually was in the room helping mug the guy across the room if you would don't have to. I think that's exactly why they didn't do it.
So I mean, there's a couple things here that drive me crazy. One of them is that the Wall Street Journal has never retracted the reporting that it put out this past weekend that Tehran was directly involved in the planning for this attack, including by bringing in both Hezbollah and Hamas together to coordinate how this attack was going to be conducted. And nobody seems to bring that up. There's a major American news outlet that's put it on the record that their reporting shows them this, and they claim that their sources are Hezbollah and Hamas, who told them this detail. Additionally, this does kind of feel like goalpost shift. It is goalpost shifting on the part of the Biden administration to say that they need to find the direct evidence of Tehran ordering the attack or something. Tehran has been funding Hamas all along. Of course Iran was involved.
Yeah, of course, and this is where John Kirby and others are being very disingenuous. They mark my words, Vince. They've got the direct evidence. I've been in those rooms. They have all got classified intercepts. They're just pretending they don't know. That's how the game is played. And I would
in
go
order
with
to cover
the Wall Street Journal report.
I'm sorry, but to emphasize this point. The reason they're not saying it is what? To cover up sources and methods, or to protect their own butts or something? What's the answer here?
To protect their own political narrative and what they're trying to do. Remember, the Biden administration said they want to revise the joint agreed upon framework for allowing the nuclear deal to get back on. And also, they've done everything they can to essentially nudge the Arabs out from our primary partner. This goes back to the Carter administration. For whatever reason, the Democrats have always wanted to partner with the mullahs over our Arab allies, and this is more of that. Frankly, at this point, Vince, I think part of the reason that they encouraged Hamas to act is because the Israelis and the South were entering a new phase of normalization of relationships. And that's the last thing the Iranians want, is a normalization of the Israelis working more closely at the commercial and economic level with the Saudis.
Well, also, it would be kind of the big achievement that the Trump administration had started, which is to normalize these bilateral relationships between Arab countries and Israel. Obviously, the Trump administration was pushing to get Saudi Arabia to sign on. They started that process. If that had come to a conclusion, that would have been what was already great relationships that the Trump administration had set up. Trump's place in history in terms of provoking some peace in the Middle East would have been well established.
No, it's almost as good an idea as a border wall here at our southwest border, Vince.
No question. And so how concerned on that issue, how concerned are you about our domestic security situation as it relates to groups like Hamas and Hezbollah with our border wide open?
put this in perspective. 25 kibbutz were destroyed because of people being unarmed. These are basically gun-free zones. For any number of reasons, I think would take too long to explain. But suffice it to say, there's no Second Amendment. There's no civilians with guns except for one. The one kibbutz that had a guy with a gun, they stopped the terrorists. With that said, Vince, we have within our own country a number of very significant gun-free zones, everything from airports to malls to inner cities, which basically have no real protection other than police, which are already put upon by the local criminals. We only see 1 in 10 people stopped at the border. That is, say, for everyone that they acknowledge they've stopped or basically interdicted, 10 get through. It's those 10 I worry about that are getting in.
Right.
And obviously, people, if you somehow think, oh, this can't happen here, famous last words. We have to be very concerned who's coming through the border right now because it's completely open.
Well, the Judiciary Committee just had this report out this week that of the illegal immigrants that the Biden administration comes into contact with here in the country, just 1% of them are ever deported now. 99% of all illegal aliens in our country are staying.
Yep. And again, we just don't know who they are. And I have no problem. My family came here as immigrants. Nobody is against immigration. The question becomes, why are we allowing this unmitigated compromise of the border to include the potential of terrorist or other criminal activities? We know about the fentanyl, Vince. We know about child trafficking. We know all this, and yet somehow it's permitted. And it's a very dangerous situation that we're going to come to find ourselves on a similar sneak attack if we're not careful, just like it happened with the Israelis and Hamas.
Let me return to the issue of Israel for our final conversation here.
Sure.
To Colonel Tony Shaffer on the phone with us. When we think about what comes next, the U.S. involvement, we talk about these warships that are on the move now. Obviously, I think there are very few people in the country, the polling shows this, who trust Joe Biden to handle this in any competent way. But how much of a risk do we run into a full-blown war that involves a bunch of different countries?
Miscalculation is the greatest danger to peace at this point because of the very fact that people can't trust Joe Biden. Even our adversaries and allies don't know. It emboldens our enemies and discourages our allies, Vince. That's what makes it so dangerous. And I'm telling you right now, Biden was 3 days late in making a statement regarding the attacks, and it was like he was squinting just to read the teleprompter, which didn't really come across as a convincing argument of strength.
Yeah. You don't even need to speak English. You don't need to speak English to get that crappy message.
That's right. That's right. So that's what the danger is. Well, our military is doing what it always does. We've got contingencies for this stuff. They're always ready to act. Again, I've been there. I know how it works. But the question is political will or lack of political will. That's what is the unknown right now.
All right. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, as always, president of the London Center for Policy Research. Thank you, sir, for your time today.